Welcome to Business Eye. Friday, the sun is shining like it is most Fridays, but that rain yesterday was shocking, and it had many calamities in my household as well as probably on the road. And I have to say as well, I just want to say to all the people out there, there is an icon in radio who passed away this week, and that was Gay Byrne. And I'm sure most of us grew up listening to him either on the radio or on the Late Late Show, or as we were children on the Gay Byrne toy show. So my respect to Gay. He was a legend, and to his family as well. And on that note, Simon, who have we got today?
We've got two wonderful guests today, and it's going to be a very interesting conversation. I think we're going to be talking a lot about purpose and change and resilience and happy workplaces. So it'll be a great little session, this. And so first up we have Aoife O'Brien from Empowerment Coaching.
That's it, yeah.
Okay, great to have you here.
Thank you.
And I really look forward to talking to you. And you've done a podcast with me on resilience and stuff, so I'd love to talk more about the work you do.
Brilliant.
And then Scott McInnes from Inspiring Change.
Correct, that's it.
And it's great to have you here as well.
Thank you very much, Simon.
It's like a motivation Friday. We've got two people that hopefully will knock the socks off us today, and we should live and drive to our lovely, amazing weekends in Empowered.
Exactly. Empowered,
No
motivated,
no pressure, Aoife.
Exactly.
with purpose.
I was thinking of Aoife. Aoife, I'm going to start with you first.
Oh no.
Oh no. Happy is what comes to mind when I see you on LinkedIn or on social media. Your journey has been quite interesting.
Yes.
And it went from the corporate world to taking your own footsteps into self-employment.
That's it, yeah.
But you took a route that was kind of going, look, I'm sick of all this negativity rubbish that's out there.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can make a change.
That's it, exactly, yeah. So corporate life, I worked in Dublin, I worked in London, I worked in Perth, I worked in Sydney, and then I came back to Dublin. I had a fantastic career that I really, really loved for a long, long time. And I got to a stage where I just didn't have the meaning anymore. I just didn't have that sense of purpose. And I decided to leave my job, and I took a journey on doing a diploma in coaching, and I've recently started a master's in organisational behaviour in DCU as well, which is absolutely fantastic. And I run my own business empowering people to be happier at work effectively.
Do you think that people aren't happy in work?
So many people are not happy in work. If you can believe the polls that are done by the large consultancies, it's about 85% of people are actually not engaged in work at the moment.
Do you know that there was a survey which was done in California? It was done by the University of California, and in that study they recognised that 71% of entrepreneurs suffer at one stage in their life of some form of breakdown.
Wow.
Now that can be, not breakdown, mental disorder, and that can be a breakdown. It can be depression, it can be ADHD, it can, there was different percentages of this, but the overall was that 71% of entrepreneurs, business owners, at some stage are overwhelmed, suffering from anxiety. And it even then drifts back into, it was the Entrepreneurial Awards in England did a survey as well, and they found that 71% of entrepreneurs and business owners as well suffer from depression, imposter syndrome, and a lack of belief in themselves.
Yeah.
So you're on the right road.
Yeah,
you're on the right road.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I can totally relate
So
to
do you know
that.
what that is? That means for every 10 business owners or entrepreneurs that we know, 7 of them at some stage have suffered. I have as well. I tell that story.
And me,
yes. And I'm a happier person for discovering it.
I think you have to go through that pivot point in life. And the other thing then is, I think so many nearly all organisations work on the basis of goals, right?
Yeah.
Whereas for individuals, what really matters is their values rather than the goals.
Yeah.
So I think there's inherently a disconnect in organisations. They don't really work by values; they work by goals. What do you think of that?
Oh, totally. Absolutely true. I mean, some organisations I worked with, they talked about what their values were, but the behaviour in their organisation, the culture of the organisation didn't reflect those values whatsoever. And what I do is help people to understand what their values actually are, so the company values, the behaviour that's actually coming through, and how to find people who actually match with those values so that they're more productive and that they're happier in work.
Here's one for you, and Scott, I'll throw this at you as well. I've often gone into large companies and I've read out their mission statement, and then I've asked the people, what is this? And none of them know what it says. Where does this quoted? And they, Facebook or someone says, no, that's yours. And then dissecting that into such a way to what does it mean? Like, are these things, Scott, just words that people put on paper to make us look cool, but should they be using them as a purpose to really focus on internal and external situations within the company?
I think they absolutely can be just words on a wall, and if they are, then actually I did a project for a large client about 2 years ago and had to write a note for the CEO, and one of the lines in there was, if these values and this purpose remain just words on a wall, then we failed. It's interesting your point about when you call out people's mission and get them to tell you what company that is and they don't know it's their own company mission. A lot of that for me stems from the fact that they haven't created it.
Yeah.
So often staff aren't asked to input into their purpose or their values or their mission or vision, and then they don't feel a sense of ownership. And once people don't feel a sense of ownership, they don't really care about it. It's not on their radar. And exactly to that point about them not recognizing their own mission, that's maybe the reason why. I think.
Don't you think this is inherently because for sole traders and entrepreneurs, the purpose is reason for existence, right? That's what purpose is, right? And so everybody around this table, because we work for ourselves, we have a reason for existence. It's to bring our unique skills and connect them with what the market wants. But in big organizations, thanks Joe, in big organizations, the reason for existence for thousands of employees is not usually not the same as the reason of existence of the company. So there's inherently always a disconnect in big companies.
So that's a great question. And I was doing a bit of work only this morning, actually, for a client and they're big, they're 850 people, they're global, doing some work on helping them to shape their purpose and their values with their staff. So I had 28 people this morning in a room throwing words up on a wall on post-it notes, trying to get their insight into, well, what makes this organisation tick? What are the things that you think are going to really help you to get to the next level as a company? And it's interesting that disconnect between personal purpose and corporate purpose is definitely a thing.
Massive.
And the thing that I talk to clients about all the time is, people have to have a good reason to want to get out of bed on a Tuesday morning in the lashing rain, or yesterday morning, for example, in November, because it's miserable. And that purpose is the thing that can really help them do that. Yeah. It's hard because, if the company has a purpose, the role, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a lot, I hope we will, of leaders is crucial. It's all very well and good, the CEO of Garmin coming out and saying, our purpose is to beat yesterday. That's what we help our clients do. That's what we help athletes do. That's what we want to do internally. But actually, what does that mean if I work in finance versus sales versus marketing versus digital marketing versus whatever?
But if you're talking that within an organisation, my belief on that is and there is where the issue lies, because it is the accountants, it is the marketing, the sale, and they're all just labels.
Yeah.
And we should strip those labels down and have those labels as just a person being human beings. And it was something that I was working on yesterday, and I came up with it. Says, look, it's not about a company, it's not about a brand, it's about a community. And if we can get large organisations to function as a community instead of a brand or a company, they'll thrive. They'll do a lot more on it as well. Yeah. So, are both of you, even though you are still on the same message, but doing it in different ways, and that's what the journey is about. People will get you, Scott. Aoife, people will get you. People won't get me, and people will get Simon. But we find our own tribes.
Totally.
Call them what's that and that. What do you feel? If I'll open up to you, and then Scott, I want to ask you the questions yourself. What do you feel makes a good leader within an organisation?
To me, the top thing is self-awareness. And that, like, without doubt, it's understanding yourself. There's so many leadership courses out there. There's so many things on offer. And a lot of the stuff that I learned in the Masters as well, you have all these different theories. There's so many theories out there. Really, it boils down to how well do I know myself? What are my own strengths? Where do I need to ask for help? How do I deliver feedback? Am I open to receiving feedback as well from my subordinates, from my managers, all of that stuff? To me, that is really, really key.
The key in that as well is what happens when things go wrong, because a lot of people, what happens if it go right, or what do I need to get from A to B, but they don't ask the tough questions. What are the consequences if this does go wrong? Scott, back to the first question to yourself: what makes a good leader?
I agree with the self-awareness piece wholeheartedly. In any courses that I run, any workshops that I run, it always seems to come back, regardless nearly of the subject matter, it always seems to come back to people being more self-aware. I think the one I would add to that probably, and it comes up time and time again, because I ask the same question on my podcast, the Inspiring Change podcast, cheap plug there. The second one that always comes up is vulnerability. Leaders not necessarily, in fact not necessarily, not having all of the answers. It's about being able to put your hand up and say, actually, you know what, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. What do you think? As a group, what do we think? As a team, what do we think? How can we make it better? And that whole idea of actually not knowing the answer, but being able to listen and ask great questions. That for me is a big thing from a leadership perspective.
I think that's critical, because what's the most important thing for leaders is having a mindset for growth, right? Organizations need that mindset for growth, but you can only really have a mindset for growth if you're honest, if you're self-aware and you're honest with yourself. And so that authenticity is critically important.
That goes back to the imposter syndrome.
It does. Exactly.
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 One of the things as well, you're talking about leaders, like a good friend of mine became the CEO of the European branch of a company with 4,500 employees, and he was bringing in all the managers, and he said he was terrified, and he had a book on his leg underneath the table. And do you ever read the one that was I think it's Eat More Cheese? And he had that, and there was questions in that, and as he was talking to somebody, this guy ruled, and he'd look down and he'd have a little read of a sentence so we could ask the person on as well. And it was that growth.
I'm interested, Scott, in this whole purpose thing, right? So we've all got similar sort of backgrounds, and we're all coaches and consultants, and I've done work in that space, and I'm just talking to a very large company, a very successful company, who I wouldn't have thought would have even needed to look at this whole area, but they're now wanting to look at the area of purpose. On the one hand, I look at the whole area of purpose and I think it's as simple as, am I good at this, and does the world need it, and connecting the two. I think coaches and consultants can overcomplicate this stuff, or am I missing something?
No, that ikigai thing of what does the world need, what am I good at, and
connecting
those
them.
things, and connecting them together is key. I think often, and I actually only said this in the workshop this morning when they asked for when I was asking them to define what they thought their values should be, and I said, you might be thinking that, why are you asking us? Because surely that's what we're paying you for. And I said, and as a reasonable challenge, however, if I come back to you with a set of values that you don't agree with, that don't resonate with you, then they're not going to work for this organisation. And in actual fact, for people like us going into organisations, it's to facilitate a conversation. It's to take their input, their feedback, their thinking, and play it back to them in something which is a little more compelling and a little more connecting and a little more human, which is something that organisations aren't very good at doing.
That makes
I think
sense.
we probably are.
So it's to frame it within a siphon or a funnel for them, but not to dictate. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
The question is, we're going to take a quick break, but I just want to leave the switches and maybe we can ponder on it. Are we all just giving a big spin, or is the world actually changing? And on that note, let's take a break and we'll be right back. And welcome back to Business Eye. Friday afternoon, some super guests in today, Scott and Aoife. Hi guys.
Hello there.
He's having fun.
Yeah.
We are.
I asked a question before the break. My question was, are we just spinning a yarn, or is the world changing? Who wants to go first as I look at Aoife?
I'll go first. Yeah, since you're looking at me.
They're looking at you.
Let's say two people around the table agree and other two people agree but disagree with the other two. So I would be of the faction that, yeah, things are definitely changing. I think the world of work is changing. It used to be that someone stays in the same role for life almost, and oftentimes didn't get their sense of purpose or their sense of meaning from work. They got it from other places, like, going to mass or going to church. Things have changed an awful lot. People tend to stay in jobs for much shorter periods of time. And they look to progress quickly through companies. They've sussed out that it's a pyramid scheme. It's one big giant pyramid scheme, and one person at the top. So how do they progress? They move around. They change around.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's that old way. Is that the change? Is that the new generation no longer want to be in a company for 20, 30 years? They want that variety.
I'm not even sure it's a variety thing. I think it comes back down to this sense of purpose that we were talking about, and values, and finding a company that has similar values to you and seeing those values demonstrated back.
I think it's a big mindset switch in the market. So, youngsters, I've interviewed, Generation Ys and Zs, and they have 6 months here, 1 year there. The mindset just seems to be totally different. It's fulfill my soul and do what I want to do and then move to the next place. That never dawned on me back in the 80s or 90s when I started work. I was terrified of my boss. I had to do the work for them.
Yeah.
I didn't think about me. I thought about them, serving them.
And the fact you might not get another job.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that was it as well.
Does it come back to the instant gratification thing? They can just swipe and find a new job.
Maybe.
There's the thing is, if I'm looking at someone, say to employ someone, and I look at their LinkedIn profile, which is, and I go, they're 6 months, or they're there 12 months, or they're there 3 months, I kind of go, I'm not going to hire them because I'm not going to, it takes 3-4 months to get someone, up to speed in what we're doing. Some companies, I don't know, it takes a year to get people, especially in the tech companies, and then suddenly they jump off.
But conversely, if you've seen somebody and they've been at a place for too long, does that put you off as well?
No, it doesn't, because I was one of them.
and in fairness, looking around the table at the hairlines, just of the men, I'm not including you in this comment.
We've all been around too long.
I think that's a mindset shift, and I think I often talk to organisations, and actually Google. I interviewed the chief people officer for Google Europe about 10 or 12 podcast episodes ago. She said that they've done lots of research and they don't believe that the millennial thing is actually a thing, which is very interesting for Google, who hires a lot of them. I suppose the point of the comment is that we have to start thinking differently as hirers and as organisations to make sure that if somebody is only staying for 6 months or 12 months, that we get them in, we get as much from them as we can, they get as much from us as they can, and they move on, because the world of work has changed. We don't have time.
But that's what I'm asking you. Are we spinning, or is the world changing?
The world is definitely changing. The world is, and it's not the horse and carriage. It's not the horse and carriage to motor car change, the huge big industrial changes that we've seen that take 50 years to happen or 100 years to happen. It's the changes, it's the very little changes, micro changes. And I was reading a book recently by a guy called, surname's Cheesewright, on change, and he talks about the amplitude, so the size of a wave versus the frequency of a wave, and we're getting lower amplitude waves, so they're smaller waves, but they're way more frequent. So we're not seeing these big tsunamis of industrial revolution coming, but we're seeing little tiny changes all the time.
Okay, well then you talk there, say we've had the industrial age, okay, we've had the technology age. Are we now then living in the survival age? The way the world is with the environment and the way companies are driving, we've Generation Y, Generation X. Is this the generation of survival? That it's a bigger shift than we actually think it is, because everything is flipping on its side.
It's a bigger shift because there are so many small shifts, and those really little shifts are adding up to be much, much bigger than the big shift, like an industrial revolution, for example.
Yeah,
motor car.
I think on the flip side of that, what I'm sensing and kind of seeing is it's more of a push the ticket age, that people seem to be doing more and more things.
For us, the old age.
Yes, yeah.
I'm distancing myself from that last comment. Thank you very much. As is Aoife.
But
we both just sat back in our chairs there.
But I do think people are doing more and more things to explore themselves and to see where they're heading. In the past, people didn't bother do that.
I was about to say, I think
I think there is.
I think there's a lot more self-awareness, like I was saying about earlier.
That's what I'm saying to you.
Yeah.
Is that there's self-awareness because we are aware, but there's other people out there that aren't.
That aren't, yeah.
So is it just we're in that category? Do you know the saying, energy goes where energy flows, and you hang around the same sort of people.
Yeah.
But there's other people out there, and I was discussing with someone yesterday, who, when I spoke to them, they looked like I was a complete idiot.
Yeah. But I think more people are
There's more awakening.
aware.
Yeah.
There's more.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're probably all wrong.
We're gone very, very spiritual all of a sudden.
We won't use the Obama word woke, because Obama doesn't like woke.
Do you know what it is? It's collective consciousness.
That's exactly what it is.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think
that's what my TED talk was about.
Exactly.
There, yes.
Okay, and I think back to your original question around, are we over egging the cake, in summary? And I think the answer is probably no. I think all we're doing is bringing awareness to organisations and people in organisations that things have to change in organisations, and particularly that piece around millennials. Around if we are only keeping them for 6 or 12 months, then we have to create something within the organisation to attract them. But then to keep them for the 6 or 12 months...
Is that like a pool table that can't be ever used, and if you go
exactly.
here, you're fired?
And that's interesting. That's exactly the point. It's all very well and good having pool tables and bean bags and free canteens and all that kind of stuff. If you don't have time to use it because you're too busy, or actually you don't believe in the purpose of the organisation anyway, then no amount of pool tables or free beer or free coffee is gonna make you want to work in that organisation.
But I was interested when I think that was a really deep point when you mentioned about the resonance of the wave seems to be getting faster and faster and faster. Because looking at the whole area of purpose, and on the one hand it needs to be crystal clear in organisations, but the experience, what I'm noticing is that there seems to be more and more constant refinement and improvement and refinement of purposes. Because brands, the whole world is looking at brands, and the world's getting more and more interconnected, and therefore, if you don't keep moving forward, you'll stagnate. What do you think of that, Scott? You're kind of grimacing a bit.
Yeah, because my take on it is that the purpose of an organisation should be the purpose of an organisation, and where those tweaks and changes happen is locally on teams. And it comes back to my point earlier about the power of leadership, and why leaders have to be those people who can translate and they can contextualize the purpose for their teams. So if the purpose of the organisation is X, what does that mean to us when we work in finance or HR? And actually often the support functions in an organisation like a big bank or a big manufacturing company, they're the ones that feel less connected to that because they're not connected to the customer. People in sales and marketing, they see the customer all the time. But if I work in finance or in HR or in one of those background support functions, I don't get to see that. So their leaders telling those stories and making that connection for them is really important.
Oh, it's all well and good. And it's wonderful that it's happening. And, as you said earlier on, Simon, was that when you were younger, when we were younger, the boss would say you do something and you would do it because you were fearful. Okay? So, and it was, years ago, it was customer was always right until proven wrong, which now we know it doesn't exist. Companies are shifting because of what people are asking, so they're looking about internally their staff and then looking externally at the customers. But that's brilliant when we are not in a recession, and suddenly when a recession hits, a lot of all that goes out the window, and it goes back to survival mode with a lot of companies.
But should it go out the window?
It shouldn't, but it does.
Yeah.
Like what's the biggest thing that companies stop spending, cut their budgets on when they go in a recession?
Marketing.
Training and marketing.
Which is, so
it's but the companies that do invest in those things during times of recession are the ones that survive. That's the thing.
Scott, you mentioned before that you're not sure about whether the corporate purpose should be changing, and maybe it's about the leadership. But what about, for example, if you're a packaging company, right, and you're shipping stuff around the world, but you're obviously doing that, you need to be emitting a lot of carbon stuff because your boxes are on planes, right? Is that a reason to change your purpose, or honestly, or is it shallow to say to the world, we're no longer a packaging company, we're an ethical green logistics company. We're moving into that space. Or, for example, like some of the airlines now are looking at putting money into green funds, right? For over the countries they're flying over. Is their purpose pivoting from just being a polluting airline to being part of a green movement? Is what I've just described there part of changing purpose, or is it something more cynical?
I think it's part of changing how, because I think your purpose. Let's take an example. Let's take an example of your packaging company.
Yeah.
So your packaging company purpose might be to bring loved ones together because of a granny sending a birthday package to the grandson. And the grandson's 5 and lives in the States, and she lives in wherever she lives. That's the why. So in terms of the overall purpose, that's that. The how. That, for me, is much more about what you've talked about there. And that is the bit that underneath that shifts, because it has to shift based on market pressures and based on... Exactly. So maybe that is, suddenly all the world is talking about, environmental impact, talking about carbon footprint, talking about all of those things, the Amazon burning down, and we're an organisation that uses lots and lots of paper, therefore lots of trees. What is it we're doing differently, still in pursuit of that same purpose, but what is it we're doing differently to stay relevant and environmental and on the right side of sustainability?
So the how almost becomes as important as the purpose.
Well, the how is the how
underpins the purpose.
It's the what, why, and how. It's the what is what you do. The how is how you do it, and the why is
But you're talking about all the environmental. It's the one thing is that we're only because of the platforms we have and the growth is that. We know that these things are happening, but they've been always happening in the 70s and the 60s. Like if you look at the Philippines had it was a typhoon there and killed so many people, and the reason why there were so many people killed because they've cut down all their trees. For farming. These things have been happening. We're only getting more aware of it. And by doing that, it's that change that we're having on us. So
it's the interconnection of the world.
It's more of a. I mean, to me, what you're talking about is more of a social responsibility thing, and how a company is perceived, and the kind of thing that they quote unquote should be doing, and they really should be doing that kind of looking after the environment.
Just pivoting on, so you mentioned social responsibility, but what about personal responsibility and personal care? We did a podcast and I was talking about resilience. And I'm fascinated in that whole subject. How important is resilience to both of you personally and in terms of what you do professionally?
A couple of points on that, and I know we mentioned on the podcast, and I'm going to get a cheeky plug in now as well. Happier at Work podcast.
Let's all get our podcast. I have 2 podcasts, radio shows. I have a talk coming up as well.
Stop plugging that. So cheap. Stop that.
What we spoke about is there's resilience on the one hand. That companies, it's a big buzzword for companies, and they're using it as a way for people to do more work. So they're helping people to be more resilient so that they're more productive. And that's kind of the cynic's approach to it and a wrong approach in my opinion. But people do need to be able to handle everything that life throws at them. And it's about being able to manage yourself really in those types of situations, and especially on a personal level, taking personal responsibility. Not if you're heading towards burnout. And people have said to me, I feel like I'm going to burn out, and it's like, what are you doing about it? I'm continuing to do what I'm doing, and it's exactly learning to say no,
learn to
slow down, boundaries, self-care, having a bath, going for a walk, discovering for yourself what self-care means for you, and actually implementing that.
Do you know what I did to actually remove myself from that? I decided that I wasn't going to get involved in email anymore, and I don't do email. Nice. And the reason I don't do it is because whoever said I had to in the first place. And because all you were doing was just getting spammed, and everything was coming in and overwhelming, and you jump in the morning and look at me. So all my clients know, don't do email. If you want to get in touch with me, it's WhatsApp or Messenger, and you should have known that. So
that's testing.
but that's I have it, and my PA and all use it to communicate. But if you want to, if there's a connection with me, it's
go straight to
it's go it's picking up that phone, and I hate that. You'd be speaking to someone through email for 50 emails over a period of 5 days where you could pick up the phone, make that call, and it's done in 10 minutes. And on that note, I think we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back, folks, and we'll talk to you soon.
sunshine when she's gone. Only darkness every day. Ain't no sunshine when she's gone, and this house just ain't no home anytime she goes away. Anytime she goes away. Anytime she goes away.
Yes, we're flip-flopping around. I'm more confused today than I was when I woke up this morning.
Is that our fault, do you think?
I think so.
I think it's the fact that I'm wearing my Christmas Canadian Mountain shirt. Here.
Christmas.
It's very Scottish.
Yeah, it is.
Christmas, the black ties now. I've been
just
invited
bedazzled you.
to 2 black ties so far. I usually get 4 or 5 invites, so I'm looking forward to them. The L shorts being on and the dicky bow. I have 2 dicky bows. One you just clip on and one you tie, and I still make a hand to the one you tie. I always take it out.
Nobody can tie
I
those.
take it out and I tie it up, and then I go, oh no, damn, and I spend 20 minutes in the bedroom on it. That. There's just one of their broadcasters, Emer Duffy, is running an event in County Louth, I think, towards the end of the month as well, and Vicky Keenan on how to improve help your business with Twitter and on LinkedIn. So Emer Duffy, she's a broadcaster here. You'll find her on LinkedIn, and it's going to be a great course. I know these 2, and they are super intelligent when it comes to Twitter and LinkedIn. So, folks, getting back, we've got about 15 minutes before I will then allow you to plug your podcast and all what you're doing all. But we're talking about change. We're talking about what's happening. What's the future? Where do you see it all ending? So, Aoife, again, unfortunately you're looking straight into my eyes, so better looking into your eyes than Scott's eyes.
Yeah, with the end, I feel like we're talking about the end of the world.
No, where's it all? Where's all this? And we don't have a recession, and the banks and the tech companies don't pull us down. Did you see that article?
I did.
Yeah. Where's it all going?
I would like to say it's going more local. So it's starting to go more local already. So
Explain.
I mean, shopping in your local butchers, shopping in your local fishmongers, rather than shopping in these big, international supermarkets. So that would be the first thing. We're taking it back into understanding provenance, they call it. So where is your food actually coming from? And shopping seasonally as well. So I picked up some raspberries, I think it was, in the supermarket the other day, and I looked at them and I thought, oh, the assumption is that any fruit that you're getting that they can grow in Ireland has come from Ireland. No, they didn't come from Ireland. They came from Portugal.
I got green beans from Kenya.
And apples from New Zealand.
Yeah.
Why?
And people are starting to become more aware of that and choosing seasonal vegetables and choosing.
But going into the companies and going in, how's the dynamics? Where do you see the dynamics of a company changing in the next 5-10 years with the conversations that we've had here?
If I have anything to do with it, which I will,
you will.
It's about companies understanding what their values are and how those values are actually showing up and how the behaviours are impacting people in the workplace. Are they aligned with what they're saying that they do and what they're saying that they stand for, and hiring people who reflect those values back into them? So hiring the right people and satisfying employees' needs as well, understanding what those needs are. We all have 3 basic needs of autonomy, relatedness and competence, and it's about giving people the responsibility to and the control to and the choice of how they perform their jobs and getting on with other people, so choosing people in the same company who are similar. And I don't want to go down the road of it's the same it's all the same people. It's more similar values but diverse thinking, so bringing in people who think differently.
But how do companies get onto this bandwagon? And so put it this way, so traditionally companies have done 2 things, right? They've provided value to customers and they provided value to shareholders, right?
Yeah.
And then back in the 60s or 7, this triple bottom line accounting thing came out that said the third thing you need to provide value for is the community and the environment and stuff. But it's never really been. There's been a lot of lip service about that, but it seems to be heading in that direction. But how do we? There are always going to be outliers, but is it really, really heading in that direction? Is that third value set the greater good of mankind and the environment stuff, is that ever really going to happen unless somebody cracks the whip?
Well, it's very interesting that if you looked in the media a couple of weeks ago, there's a crowd in the US called the Business Roundtable, which represents CEOs from the top 388 American firms, and they had changed recently their purpose from being shareholder value focused to being stakeholder value focused. So that whole idea that it's not just about making money, it's about having value in the environment in which you work, being sustainable, yes, making money for shareholders because they're one of your stakeholders, but it's about more than just that. It was interesting that of the 388 people that are on their membership, 388 CEOs, and they're all, you name a big global organization, they're on the list. 381 signed up. I don't know who the 7 are, and I haven't found out yet, but I'd like to find out. For me, that's fine, right? And that is, and to use your word, bandwagon, which I don't like because I think it devalues the whole idea.
But if it's necessary, it's necessary.
But I think in this case, it definitely could be seen as a bandwagon. Because just because you've signed up to something, okay, well that's great Fujitsu, or that's great Accenture, or that's great Coca-Cola, or insert big brand here. What are you actually doing to bring that to life?
And there it is. You've hit the nail on the head. All these companies are going great. We've signed up to this. But what are we actually doing? What we everyone's talking. Will there be a planet here for our children's children? And we go, oh yeah, well we're looking after it. But what are we doing ourselves? Are we going into the supermarkets? You were talking about food and saying, I'd rather not have plastic on my food anymore. Or are we going into, when we're buying our coffees, that's why we had Recup on last week, talking about, I don't want these cups anymore. We as human beings, as ourselves, need to do it ourselves, because if we do it, then other people will do it. Instead of talking about values and writing all this stuff and not doing anything from grassroots.
Changing habits is hard. Habits are changing habits is hard. They're very, 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 very hardwired into us.
If we don't change the habits, we're screwed.
Absolutely. But I think it's interesting when you look at things like the plastic bag levy, or, as was announced yesterday, the coffee cup levy. I see you there with your throwaway cup. That coffee cup levy, where they're going to put a 25-cent levy, that is going to categorically make people have a keep cup in their bag or in their office, or bring it with them. That's going to change, and that legislation will change people's habits. In a work context, it's about putting in place, for me, reasons why, leadership, not holding a big stick over people and saying, if anybody, we actually talked, and so the office I'm in town, the Tara building, we talked about, do we actually stop people bringing in cups of coffee at the door? Do we just not? No, you can't bring that in. Sorry.
It's
do
like
you go that far?
The lexicon in Dunleary is, you're not allowed in. You're not allowed to drink plastic bottles in there. If you're sitting there in the library in Dunleary, you can't have plastic.
Brilliant. Will they ask you to leave?
They'll say, sorry, this is a policy of no plastic bottles.
Brilliant.
So I don't believe the 25% levy will make a change.
But it will.
I know you say it will, but I don't think it will, because it's not going to stop me not buying a cup of coffee. But I do believe is that we had a guy in here last week called Recup, and these are recyclable cups that they're distributing out to all the places. You buy a cup for €1, or you get into a scheme, and these are recycling cups.
Okay.
And by this is you're changing, and you go to places that have this cup.
Okay.
That's where it is.
Yeah.
We have to. You said there that it's really, habits have to change, and it's hard to, but unfortunately, they have to change.
They do.
They have to. I can't drive. Oh well, that's a habit that I have. Or I'm on the phone when I'm driving. Oh, that's a habit. It has to change.
If you talk about companies and what companies can do, it's not companies, it's individuals in those companies who are making those changes, and that's really what it boils down to. And thinking about your own personal contribution, I'm not representing a company. I am doing what I think is right. I want to, conserve the environment and all of those. Exactly. Yeah. And when other people see, I think we touched on it earlier, when other people see what you're doing, then they're inspired by that action. And
I use the analogy: you're sitting on the beach, there's a plastic bottle there, you're just looking at it, it's dirt. Someone walks along, they pick up that plastic bottle, they put it in the bin, and you go, think nothing. a year down the road, you're on the beach, you see plastic, you've seen someone do it without you realising, you're picking that up and you're putting it in the bin. That's the ripple effect.
Yeah.
And the more and more people that do something, forget about the levies or the taxes, the more and more people that do and question and ask, that's when it happens.
And back to the very top of the show, where we were talking about awareness and self-awareness, it's knowing that when you arrive up at that plastic bottle, and we've all done it. And I have actually, I've done exactly that, and I've walked past it, and then I've gone, I could leave it. No, stop. Just go back, pick it up, and put it in the bin.
Yeah.
And it's just having that mindset, just being aware of that and having that mindset.
Self and situationally aware.
And I think that translates very nicely into the business world as well. What can we do differently in work? Rather than just leaving it lie, because that's the way we've always done it before. How can we do things differently and actually being?
Do you know what my pet hates are?
What?
People that park on footpaths, in driveways when you're walking. I love to stand over the cars.
People who double park on those car park spaces.
Folks, we are coming to the end, but before we go, I would like to, Scott, I'd like to tell us about your business, and you can tell us where we can find your podcast as well.
So is this where I get to do a cheap plug? But I'm allowed to now, is it?
Yeah.
So I founded Inspiring Change about 2.5 years ago, and Inspiring Change is about helping organisations to create better and higher performance cultures. And I think the whole idea that if you've got a better culture in your organisation,
we should have spoke about culture
and a group of people, we'll do it again. We'll do it again.
We will.
If you've got a group of people in your company who want to be there, who are being led really well, who are really informed about where the organisation is going and feel engaged and want to give that bit of discretionary effort, then it's a win-win, because it's a place they want to go to where they can learn, but also as a result the company wins as well.
And where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
They can find me on LinkedIn at Scott McInnes. They can find me at inspiringchange.ie. If you want to find the podcast, you can find that on Apple Podcasts, the Inspiring Change podcast, and on all good podcast platforms.
Aoife.
So my name is Aoife O'Brien. I'm from Empowerment Coaching. People can find me on LinkedIn, Aoife O'Brien. My website is empowermentcoaching.ie. My podcast is called Happier at Work. That's available on Apple or Spotify or any good podcast platform. My company, Empowerment Coaching, I work with organisations, I work with individuals, empowering people to be happier at work. So in terms of finding a good fit. I'm obsessed with this whole idea of fit and finding the right fit for people. So if a company, again, going back to culture, so it'd be great, to talk about culture at another stage, thinking about the values that people have and finding people who match with those values. And
we're all about values.
Yeah,
Perfect.
exactly.
Perfect.
Hello, Simon. Hi, I'm
Hello, Joe. How are you?
It's
good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah. Are you going to be busy next week?
I am. I'm going to be really busy next week.
Good.
Yes, I am.
Good.
Me
too.
I have a few things on. I'm finishing off a free online mini-series training session for sales marketing and
cool.
all that
Cool.
strategy and
Cool.
tactics. I have the mastermind coming up on the end of November as well in Dunleary, so
Cool.
that's bringing people in there as well. And people can catch me on joedalton.ie, and if the mastermind is jdc.ie.
Great.
So yeah, I love my life.
Likewise.
And I'm launching, we're launching the Conscious Business Academy. We're launching that, the team building days for large corporates.
Yeah.
So we're rolling
It's a
that
great
out
program.
next week.
Yeah.
We're rolling that out. So what about yourself?
Busy. I've got about 4 different training programs, a masterclass in London in a couple of weeks on putting brand at the core of your financial strategy, a couple of programs here with Aviation SkillNet. So I'm at home beavering away writing, typing stuff.
You have a radio show as well, I believe.
I think I do, yeah.
Yeah, you do.
It's a great one.
Yeah, I have a radio show. I have 2 radio shows.
You do?
And a podcast
Yeah.
as well. So it's not bad.
Yeah.
Not bad. Anyway, folks, I would like to say thank you very much. Scott, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Pleasure's been all mine.
Eva, again,
being here.
it is. We've spoken many times, and till next week, everyone have a super weekend. Christmas is coming around the track, and next week we have, who have we got on next week? We've
A couple of your guests.
a couple of my guests next week. Yes, we have. I think we're talking finance, and we're talking about mindset again next week.
Exactly.
And then we're going to be getting into the whole fitness and nutrition somewhere along the way, and how to make
Ready for
money
Christmas.
for 2020. Until next week, folks. Have a super weekend. Be safe, and we'll see you next Friday.